welcome to our webinar this afternoon. It's called What Makes a Successful Website? Planning for your next website project. I am Paul Coffey. I'm Coast Digital's Production Director, and at Coast Digital I look after the delivery of our website projects from early stage engagement, research, through design, development, deployment, and then obviously the hosting and the support of those projects as well. Now, for my own part, I've worked at Coast for the better part of 9 years. I've worked in digital agencies for just over 15 years, and I've worked in project environments for just over 20 years. So that just gives you some understanding of me and my background. The session today that we're going to be holding is in support of a guide that we've recently published called How to Make Your Next Website a Success. Now, if you haven't already taken a look at the guide, I can encourage you to do so. If you click on the link there, that should take you through to the website and you'll be able to download it. The guide was written after interviews with all of the project team that we have here, just looking over the various experiences that we've had over the years of project delivery. There's a huge amount in that guide, and today's session we're going to try and highlight 3 sections of that guide that we think are of particular importance, that we think you'd like to hear about. Now, instead of just hearing me drone on for the entire session, I'm going to be joined by my learned colleague, Tom Pretty. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone, afternoon. I'm Tom, I'm one of the digital consultants here at Coast. So I handle all matters of sort of UX, research, everything through from the project, sort of content strategy, everything like that really.
Good stuff, okay. Well, what we'd like to do then is just sticking with the guide for a second. We've focused this guide on anybody that is starting to think about or going through some preparation on building a new website, whether that be engaging with stakeholders, engaging with, or just trying to collate the research that they might have available, or putting together a business case. So that's who we focus this particular guide on. The guide itself really gets us to think about a couple of issues, and again, it touches quite a lot of topics, to be honest. But it gets you thinking about understanding the current site's purpose, and then also the new site that you might want to build. Just trying to understand its purpose. It gets you thinking about defining objectives and critical performance indicators as well, and measurements for success on any new site that you might come up with as well. It gets you to think about your understanding of your audience and users, and also gets you thinking about the research opportunities and any research that you might have already that might at a later date become useful as well. And it gets you thinking as well about learning lessons from your current website as well, so the performance of that site and how that's gone. The guide itself ends in a brief template. So what we put together is in this guide, we've just put together a template that you can follow that allows you to put together a brief covering some of the advice and the sections that we have in the guide. For what it's worth, we've already begun to receive briefs using this template, and look, from our perspective, from an agency perspective, they're really, really clear. And whether or not they come here or anywhere else, then obviously that template is a really useful asset. So that's the guide that we're running this session in support of. Today's session, however, we're really going to focus. There's a huge amount in that guide, but we're really going to focus in 3 areas. We're going to focus on your understanding of your current site and its purpose. We're going to understand. We're going to try and cover your understanding of your users and your audiences, and also we're going to look at the topic of what can be learned from your existing site as well. So that's the focus of today's session. So if we just turn now to the first of those topics. So website purpose, what do we mean by that? Well, actually, it's just an understanding of what your website does for you in its current form. So the role of a website for you in your overall business strategy. For example, if you had a service, is your service delivered through your current website? If your website doesn't actually deliver the service, is your website the place where people might come to find out about your service or your products and then come away from the website again following a journey to purchase? And so really it's about, as you can well imagine, when you're trying to understand the objectives of a site, that can be quite a complex place. There can be quite a few people that are looking for their particular objectives to be the main objective. And so really it's about building a priority list or a hierarchy of those objectives. So that's really what we mean by a website's purpose. And so why is that important is, I guess, the next obvious question. So that from our perspective, a clearly stated purpose acts as a guide throughout the project. It can really build the foundation for us and give us some clarity. Also, from your perspective, if you're just beginning your journey into building the business case for a new website project, it gives you a chance to engage with your stakeholders on their objectives, and that's obviously the beginning of the process of getting their buy-in. So the earlier you can involve them in a new project, then I suspect the more likely they are to try and understand the process and place some value on it and want to get involved in it and engage in it. So look, Tom, from our perspective, obviously from all the projects that we've done, clarity of purpose is a huge plus for us, yeah?
Oh, most definitely. I think we talk about sort of what happens when you don't have clarity, so a lack of purpose can often lead to sort of confusion in what the message or the positioning of that website must be. And also from a user journey point of view, it can lead to some really sort of confusing and winding user journeys because there's too much conflict in terms of why the website's there in the first place. Also later on in the project, it can also lead to sort of a loss of perspective and continuity when making decisions. And again, it can lead to just an overall muddled user experience going forward. For us as a project team, and we sort of include the clients within that project team, it gives everyone a joint aim to work towards having this purpose, and it allows those decisions to be made efficiently, allows them to be made effectively as well. So the specific risks with the lack of purpose, I would say, would be sort of making changes later down the line when they're more expensive and more time consuming and more difficult to make. Falling into the old hippo adage of the highest paid person's opinion, ways of thinking of, that might well be the purpose of the website, but having a group purpose can really help sort of nullify some of that. And not having a record of what success will actually look like without a clear purpose at the start, it's hard to understand really what what actually a successful website will look like when it comes to completion.
Got you. Okay, understood. And look, from our perspective, how do we arrive at that clarity? How do we get to that place?
Well, our starting point for site purpose would normally come from the commercial objectives. Sometimes actually from the earlier stage of the project, we'll get it in the brief. But quite often we don't really see the brief, or we don't see that sort of early part of the brief as the end of that. We start to unpack it at that stage. We really try to go behind what that commercial objective might be within the brief to get an understanding of what the actual true site purpose might be. So for instance, I mean, we quite often hear that the purpose of the website is to earn more revenue. It's very fair to say that, and I think it's quite a common opinion, but on a purely commercial basis, it's sound thinking. But for us, that will manifest itself in other ways. So we'll probably, more revenue could mean selling more products. Does that impact the way we have to design the user journeys in terms of browsing? Does that mean we need to make sure that product pages are selling more efficiently? Does it mean that we have to increase upselling? It's another way of driving more revenue. So do we have to actually increase the way that products relate to the other, improve the intelligence behind how products relate? Or could it even mean improving customer retention? I mean, that might be about getting more emails out there. It might go beyond the website. So thinking about that purpose, it can mean, going behind that purpose, it can mean a lot of different things really. In order to build our understanding of that, we don't just go on what's in the brief or what we've been told in our first meeting. We typically go out and speak to stakeholders from around the business. This can be done in a number of ways. So we try and go beyond the project team, and quite often we'll spend a day in a client's office doing sort of speed dating with stakeholders from around the business. They're fun days. We can do this face-to-face, or we can do it over the telephone, but that's, we found, really the most efficient way to do it. And then what we'll do is collate all of that information from the various stakeholders and actually bring a sort of a joint purpose to the eventual workshop that we have with the client when we're setting the direction for the website, and to show them what the actual feeling for a purpose is across the business. It also helps us understand sort of not only specific purposes for the website, also commercial objectives, specific website goals, and also measurable KPIs that we need to sort of go along with.
That's good stuff. Okay, and look, just to underline something that Tom has as mentioned there. So obviously when we go along to and we're holding stakeholder sessions as well, those interviews that we run really, again, they help with the idea of stakeholder buy-in as well. So if we can form a relationship with the people, stakeholders in the project, then that helps in some way or other later on persuade them of a particular perspective. If they can put a face to a name and they understand the sort of direction we're taking on a project. Yeah. And again, those little things help, those little soft things help.
Definitely, it avoids that, it's the first I've heard of it, type of syndrome when you're sitting people down early on in the project to speak to them about the website.
Sure. Okay. Okay. So look, in terms of how we arrive at the purpose, also how we resolve conflicts. Tom, how do we do that? How do we get through?
Well, other than having a huge rugby scrum in the middle of the meeting, we try and avoid that. What we normally try and do is look for a number of things. So we really like to have a strong project owner, someone internally who's be able to express quite forcibly what the website is trying to do and what we're set out to achieve. We can achieve the same with a good steering group as well. We try and have a steering group of 4, maybe 5 people from various parts of the business, and then we'll usually have a session with them to understand what their vision is, what the vision is from the stakeholders, and quite often we might have multiple objectives, multiple goals, multiple KPIs. So what we'll usually do there is card sort and actually get them into a priority, so we can actually, at the end of those sessions, actually have a fairly resolved set of priorities for the website in a good hierarchy. Just as a minor point before we actually dive into sort of user behaviours, I know that comes up next in user search, but actually this purpose element and this, getting the sort of commercial objectives is only one half of the coin really. We see going out and speaking to users as a way to also influence the purpose of the website and what it's trying to achieve.
Good stuff. Okay. Okay. So look, so there you have it. To the clarity of purpose, that really covers our approach. If we could just move on to understanding our users and understanding our audience. So again, what do we mean by this? Well, this is really the who and the why and the goals that these people have that arrive at our site, their motivations. Now, again, it's what we're trying to do in this research, if that's what we do in this area, is really find some commonalities amongst this group of people of which we are trying to communicate with. And this commonality is really important to us, because why is this important? Well, to try and understand research into the audience and the needs and the motivations can serve a couple of different tasks for us. Earlier on in the presentation, we were talking about the need to influence our stakeholders. Now, obviously, if we've done research into the audiences that we're talking to, not only does it help us make better decisions as a project team, because we do so on the basis of evidence, but it also helps us evidence the decisions we do make. And again, it's much easier to talk to stakeholders if you can demonstrate the thinking behind some decisions that you've made.
I've seen it settle differences of opinion many a time in workshop environments.
Yeah, no question at all. And also, so obviously not everybody that arrives at our site and all the members of our audience are exactly the same, although they can be grouped through some of the characteristics that we look at. And if we can understand their needs, it obviously helps us understand and tailor the message that we want to deliver to them, and that has value not just in the website project that you run, but also in any campaign work that you then go on to do. So obviously research that is used in a website needs to have a life outside of the site itself as well. And so you can carry some of the needs and the requirements into your messaging, into other activities that you undertake. So Tom, do you want to just talk a little bit, if that's okay, just about how we perform our user research?
Yeah, of course. So we have a number of techniques when we're performing user research. We typically base those on which ones we use on the needs of the project, the scope of the project, the insight that we're trying to gain, and also quite often the access to the users, because it's not always an ideal world where we can contact thousands of customers. It doesn't always work that way. So we need to sort of pick and choose the right methods for us at that time. We can use only one, but we tend to blend them and use them in different ways, so we're building up as much and richer insight as possible. So I'm just going to talk through sort of 3 or 4 main types of research we do. So the first one is sort of website data, and again we've got a bit on this later, I think, in the presentation. But suffice to say that we go through the website analytics packages and other behavioural software sort of tools that we've got to build a good understanding of what users are doing on the website. Now, That gives us an insight into behaviours online. It also gives us an insight into sort of how they're purchasing through the website, if they are indeed purchasing or making donations, or whatever that might be. So it gives us sort of the customer journey at the sort of the cold face. However, if you look at a customer's lifetime as they come through the site, we can also get an idea of how people are engaging the site throughout the customer journey, which gives us the early indicators and the early questions that we want to go out and ask people, to go ask in surveys and in telephone interviews later in the day. So that sort of really is our starting point, getting the website data and using that as a tool where we can. And the next kind of thing we do quite often is surveys and questionnaires. And this is really just to build some quantitative data and sort of build patterns and establish patterns in behaviour, wants and needs of users. You know, three things we're always aiming for. And surveys help us build a good bit of data behind this. This kind of insight through surveys means we can access a lot of different customer groups. So, I mean, if you've got customer data, it's very easy to send surveys out to them using something like SurveyMonkey. You've only got to add a link to an email, and you can quite easily email vast swathes of your customers. You can dissect that before you send it and segment that off. So you're speaking to specific customer groups if that's what you're aiming to achieve with the research. So it's a really economical way to get a lot of insight through. There's other ways we can do that. So where we haven't got customer data and we might want to try and speak to prospects, we might also advertise. A survey on something like Facebook using sort of paid social advertising. We may even look at some paid search advertising for it if it's demanded. And then finally, another way we can get surveys in front of people is on the website itself. We can use sort of pop-up surveys and that kind of thing. And it's just a good way of getting sort of that, sort of quantitative data that we try and do. What this sort of leads into next is really interviews, and there's two ways we do interviews really. The first is telephone interviews. So whilst it's not always possible to get in front of people and get sort of that face-to-face time, we use telephone interviews really usefully because they're quite economical. You can speak to a lot of people over a short amount of time. At this point, we can really dig into those user behaviours that have come up from the website data and also from the survey. So at this point, we're always building our understanding and then enhancing it as we go on and we speak to more people. So the way we try and do this and the way we've found it works best is when we're interviewing people, keeping it quite informal, having very open-ended questions. We found that scripts are good if you're looking to achieve quotes for a presentation. But actually an informal open interview is actually much better if you want to get the real insight from people. And an example of that really is telephone interviews. They're fantastic at finding out what really annoys people. I think because you're at the end of the phone, I think people are much happier to vocalise, as I say, their frustrations with companies and organisations. And that when people start to get angry and annoyed, that's where the real insight and real fascination can come from us. And it gives us a real indication of what we should avoid and what really frustrates people with online user experiences. Again, that can help to sort of iron out those frustrations. And then finally, we can do face-to-face interviews as well. These really have the added benefit of being able to see the interviewees' expressions as they're describing their answers. We can actually get emotional reactions, things that we say, and understand how people are really engaging. I mean, yes, people can get annoyed on the phone, but actually you can see people's physical reaction to a question. It can also help understanding the motivations that they might have. And we can carry out these in a number of ways. We can do them in users' homes, organisation laboratory settings, focus groups. I think even today some of our researchers are out in a couple of towns across the country speaking to people to sort of get some insight from a quite broad product point of view. One time this worked really well, I think, was for a certain well-known brewer that we worked with, and we were able to go to their shops and interview people as they came into the shop and did their weekend shopping. And from that, we were also able to ask them to complete user tests using one of the tools that we use as well. So not only were we able to interview them and ask them questions about purchasing behaviour and how they might choose to buy wine, beer, and various accoutrements when we go through it. It also gave us an opportunity to test how the offline shopping experience compared to the online shopping experience. And that was a really rich project because of it. We were able to build good highlight reels of people testing and good, just really good information on how to improve the user experience, really.
Got you. Okay. And so Tom, obviously we've got, as you've highlighted there, we've got a number of different sort of channels that we can use and techniques we can use. Techniques is right, so techniques that we can use as well, Tom. And so just in terms of how we're building this picture of our audience and our users, Tom, are there blends of these things that work particularly well?
Yeah, as I said at the top of that, I think we try not to use one of these elements alone. It can skew the data and doesn't really give us a good enough picture of who our users are. At the minimum, we always try and use the website data. It's typically where the biggest numbers are, so we can identify patterns faster. But we'd always try to do some user research, even if it's a very low level of just a pop-up survey or a quick poll or something like that, just so we're actually getting some user insight, because it really does help improve experiences further down the line. Certain blends that work together, so telephone interviews and surveys work really well, because you can use your surveys as a means of recruiting people for your telephone or face-to-face interviews. But face-to-face, as I highlighted in that example, works really well in a retail setting, but it also works well if you've got quite a broad audience group, or if you know you've got an audience group in one place. I mean, there's been a few times where we've been out to sort of shows and to industry events, clipboard in hand, and gone and done some quick surveys and some quick interviews with people there, because we know that our audience and our user base is going to be in one place. So again, we can do them in sort of a guerrilla way, I think is how they describe it, but yeah, we can do that as well. Just on a final point with I suppose with research and blending that research and getting into that process quite early on in the project, you should really be thinking about incentives and having to incentivize your research. It's an additional cost, yes, but unless you're very engaged with your customer base, it can be quite difficult to get hold of people to speak on the phone or to take surveys. Typically we use competitions, we'll use Amazon vouchers as means of incentives, that kind of thing, and just it helps to sort of build to actually get people to engage with you. I mean, it's fine if we work with some charities who have got very engaged supporters and they're always willing to help out, but in certain settings and certain industries that's not always the case. I mean, there's some companies who work with us that maybe haven't contacted their customers for a number of years and actually prefer not to contact their customers and try and keep them at arm's length. If that's the case, then you actually incentivization for interviews is a kind of a necessity, really.
Right. And so just to build on that for a second, so if obviously if we can engage with a user or a customer and they have taken the survey in the first instance and then they've come a part of the way of the journey with us, then if they then also go on to have a telephone interview with us as well, then they become more and more invested in the process, and actually some of that feedback can be richer because of that, and they might even go on to become part of a test group as well later on and testing products and things like that. So
we've done that in the past, and it's always our sort of aim really is to have someone that we might interview before the specification part of the project, get their insights, and speak to them, especially someone good to speak to who given us a lot of insight. And then at a later date, once we've got a prototype that we might want to test with them, we can take it back to them and then interview them about the prototype. And again, it just really adds just a richness to that process and allows us to really start testing the users early, and the same users as well, as you say, because they've engaged with us 3 or 4 times by that point. Typically, with the insight we're getting at that level is much higher.
Got you. Okay. So that, Tom, I've phrased this question. So I don't know, am I a pessimist? I don't know, but I phrased this question as, what happens if you don't do user research? Tom, actually, you could phrase it positively and say, what are the benefits of doing it? But Tom, what do you think?
There's a couple of things. So what happens if you don't do user research is ultimately the wrong decisions seem to be made. They won't all be wrong, but there'll be a lot of decisions based on assumptions and opinions. And whilst instincts can be correct, and I say there are workshops we've been in where good instinctive decisions have been taken and it's been right for the project, there's an equal number where those opinions are actually unfounded, and without the users to evidence whether those decisions are the right ones, mistakes can be made. But as you said, yeah, we can flip this to make it more positive.
Sure.
So important to answer why we need to do it. So first to understand the reasons we do research. First is to create a sort of a website mandate. And by this I mean a statement or a group of statements that marry the user research with the commercial objectives And as we were saying about the all-important website purpose earlier, it's an evolution of that. We have a mandate that really sets the direction for the whole project team. We use it quite often in our collaborative sessions when we're sort of starting a project, where we'll all have this mandate that we work to. It's on the wall, everyone's well aware of it, and it just sets the purpose and sets everyone in the same direction when we try and go to push the website and push on with the project. The second reason it's important to do research is to create the user personas. So all this research really gets boiled down into groupings of users and then down into personas. And these are what we try and do is base these on genuine behavior and genuine insights. I've seen too many too many personas in my time that talk about death metal, disliking death metal, long walks down the beach, there's all manner of dislikes Brussels sprouts, I think I saw on one, which was particularly woeful. What we try and focus on is what actually elements of the user experience do we need to put forward in front of these people. So what's going to turn them on or off about a user experience? We spoke earlier about the frustrations and what annoys people, what are those things? What are their motivations for being on the site? I mean, they're there to purchase, yes, but what's the reason behind the purchase? Why are they there? And then also what they're trying to achieve. So what are the goals they're trying to tick off whilst they're on the site? These are very practical user personas that help us shape an idea of who the website's for, and they also act as a constant point of reference for the entire project. They kind of embody the whole research, and they sit behind us. So we stick them on the wall as we work. So they're quite literally looking over our shoulder as we're doing the wireframing, as we're doing the designing, and that just keeps in mind who the user is and what they're trying to achieve. And it helps to sort of provide a sort of a homogeneous path between research and into design, and that's why we try and use them. So that's sort of two of the reasons why I think you should do user research. If you don't, you miss out on those two things, which I think are both important to projects.
Great, that's good. Okay, so well, thank you for that. Well, look, what I'd like to do now, if that's okay, is just move us on to our final topic in terms of our little deep dive this afternoon, and that's just learning from the existing site. So the existing site, for all sorts of reasons, is a great mine of evidence for us to use, and it's not just usage that I think we should probably think about as well, but it's also the delivery of that asset and how it was arrived at, and how the relationship with our delivery partner has gone since the website's been with us as well. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. So obviously we've been through the tools, look at the current usage and website behaviour, and yeah, it's not just merely how the website's used, but also I think it's an opportunity for us to see how it was delivered as well, and what lessons we can take going forward. So look, why is it important? Well, again, the current site can tell us about popular information and content, and it can give us a view of what's worked and what hasn't. It can give us evidence of how people have visited the site and on which devices and platforms, which in turn can give us clues about how people are interacting with us. It can look at, again, lessons that have been learned about what's worked in the past and what hasn't. That could also include, as I think I alluded in the research slides before this, that can also look at the campaign information that you've been running as well, where the website has interacted with marketing campaigns that you've been running too. And as I say, it just gives us an opportunity to reflect. So not just the asset and its usage, but also did we enjoy the project that was run before? Did we enjoy how it was structured? Did we enjoy how we came to the conclusion of that current site? How we made those decisions? Did we like how the level of support has been post-launch? And we should also factor some of those things in when we're thinking about our current site and how it was delivered. So, that Tom, from our perspective, our data reviews that we run in our project really focus on this sort of area.
Yeah, so we sort of touched upon it in the last section, but website data really is our first port of call. Allows us to understand how users are engaging with the website. Also allows us to benchmark performance, which is equally important, I think. Typically we use Google Analytics, although there's quite a number of analytics packages out there should you want to use them, but Google Analytics is for us pretty standard, and we use it pretty exclusively as well. So in terms of actually undertaking a data review, we've found the best way is to take quite a top level approach through the various reports within Google Analytics, and then and then that often turns up those little interesting nuggets that we can jump on and dive into a little bit deeper. But just to sort of give you an idea of the reports we run through and the kind of thing we're looking for in those reports. So we'll take the traffic summary for typically a year if we've got that data. Hopefully we have. This shows us sort of patterns and seasonality and trends in behaviour. Maybe there's declining traffic, whether there's spikes that have been caused by marketing efforts and external factors. These are all things that we need to be aware of for the longevity of the website. If we design a website if we design a website and we launch it and we're not aware that 3 times a year there's a huge spike in traffic, we haven't written that into the functional specifications that the hosting has to deal with those kind of things, we've missed a trick. So it's just basically just, you know, sweeping up those kind of things. The next we look at demographics reports. Now, unfortunately, these aren't always turned on, so and I advocate having them on. It's quite frustrating for me when I'm going through an analytics review that they're not turned on. And it's a shame because they give good insight into the age and the gender of the people visiting your website. And it also means you can split the data later on when you're doing the review in different ways, and I'll get to some of those in a minute. They're also very useful in shaping and adding a little bit of meat around your personas as well. If you can actually base the age or gender of your persona on data of why people are coming to your website, again, it adds to that richness of it. The next report usually tick off is devices, so mobile, tablet, desktop, and normally look at the last 3, maybe 4 years of the split of the traffic that's coming to the website. So normally in the last few years, obviously we've seen mobile growing, but that's not always the case. We've seen some sites that desktop has maintained a position of primacy. And what we're looking for here really is to establish whether we need to take a mobile first, a tablet first, or a desktop first approach based on the trends of the data and how people are accessing the site and on what devices people are accessing the site. This is also where it becomes quite interesting, where we can split age by device. Just the other day I was looking at a website review, and quite stereotypically there was a younger audience on the mobile, and then there was a younger audience on the mobile, and then there was a much older audience on tablet. Now we see this a lot on sites actually, with older audiences being tablets. I think there's a wider thing of people 65 plus all having tablets now and not using desktops.
Sure.
I don't know, that's something we should do a study into that, I think maybe. But so yeah, look, devices is another thing we always look at because it gives us a good impression of the types of layouts that we need to focus on. Next is traffic sources. So we need to understand how users are reaching the site, and that also impacts the sort of layouts and the decisions we might make in journeys as well. Also, from an SEO perspective, if we've got a site that receives significant proportions of their traffic from SEO, that then becomes more of an issue, obviously, for us in making sure our redirects are in order when we go to launch, and also that we're carrying across the right kind of content and maintain those positions, so they're not losing traffic when they relaunch their site. It's a key indicator of performance, particularly when we're setting those benchmarks. People don't want to lose traffic when they launch a site, and that's one of the ways we try and minimise that. We'll also look at the top content on the site. So what's popular? What are people visiting? What are people reading? And then that gives us a priority of the information. Why are people on the site? Well, you know, we can see from the top content that they're here to look at jobs or you know, or the food, or whatever that might be. So we can always pick the top subjects of why people are on the site and through the top content, and gives an idea of what we should carry over or what can be dropped. Also gives us an idea of where we might want to place some additional tracking. So we've alluded to a few times that we use sort of user engagement and page engagement tools. So we have tools that will allow us to sort of track and place heat maps on pages, so we can track clicks and that kind of thing. And there's no point putting these on the low traffic pages, because it'll take forever to build the data typically. So we put them on the top traffic pages, and those pages that are getting the most engagement. And so we can build data quickly, and we can understand in a lot more detail how people are engaging in those pages. And then also as a part of that, we might look at organic landing pages as well. From an SEO point of view, if you take your top 25 organic landing pages, you've got a good idea of how your website is represented organically online, and those are pages we typically try and carry over, or at least make sure that we're redirecting in the right way. Another report that's rarely turned on is site search. I think the value of that report is quite high actually. I just think it's really valuable in understanding what's missing from your site. because people can't find it and they head to the search box as a last resort. So it can give a real idea of how your current website is failing users. So again, it's a good report to have on. You can look at the terms that people are searching for on your site, and that gives a good idea of what's missing, or at least what's difficult to find. And then other things we'll look at are pages with the highest bounce rates. Obviously not all of the ones with the highest bounce rates, just the ones that have got a significant level of traffic. And also the sort of the GA user journey reports that will have an overarching view of how people are progressing through the site. I mean, that's just a couple of things that we cover off. Just to carry on, Paul, a couple more is we use other tools as well as GA in our data reviews. One being Hotjar, which is a really good page engagement tool. We've been using it for about 2 or 3 years now, and that allows us to set up heat maps and session recordings on site. So heat maps gives a level of fidelity we can't get with Google Analytics. It allows us to track where people are clicking on the page or tapping. They allow us to track mouse movement, which is extremely interesting. People quite often hover over things they're reading with their mouse, with their cursor, so it gives you an idea of what content's engaging on a page. And also it gives us a scroll map to see how far people are going down the page, so you can see what content's being missed and what content's most popular. So that's a really valuable tool. Session recordings as well gives a real good insight into what's frustrating people. I've sat and watched hours of session recordings and people hover around buttons, or they completely miss buttons and they go back and forward, and you've got to give you a really idea of what's being missed and what's frustrating users from that. It can even be a really useful useful way to identify if your navigation's working properly as well. And then we also sort of use some testing tools as well, which aren't strictly part of our data review, but they can help to build sort of more levels of detail around it. And at that point, we'll have users testing the website and actually going through and speaking their mind as they go through and test the website. So we get a bit more richness and another level of detail on top of what we might get from a session recording.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, look, thank you for that, Tom. So it's quite a detailed area for us, right? And I'm just thinking, we were just talking in the previous slide about blending of the research methods together. It's interesting as well to see the blending of some of these statistical reviews we do together as well. And so really in our research presentation that we put together in our collaborative workshops, that's really the thing that we start the day with, isn't it? That sort of research presentation. What role does data play in that presentation?
Yeah, first of all, we can just talk about that presentation.
A
great point is that presentation really sets the tone for our workshop, and what we tend to do as a part of our project process is that we come in, we take a research briefing, we research, and then we bring that research back to a workshop where we might be in the same room together for 1 or 2 days if you can put up with us that long. But at that point, the first element of that is to set the scene with the research. So everybody in the room has a shared understanding of what the research is saying and the direction that we need to be taking. And again, that really sort of unifies the project team and gives them a good sort of sense of direction. So we advocate that a lot, I'd say. In terms of the way data, the part data plays in that, the good quantity of data that we can get from analytics and that kind of thing gives us sort of robust patterns of behaviour. And we always try and do that. It also helps us counterbalance some of the individual behaviours we might have seen in the user research through testing or through some face-to-face interviews or telephone interviews, sort of overall behaviours. So we can sort of balance those two out. But most importantly, I think it allows us to sort of bring all of that research and tie it back to the website. And ultimately, that's what we're there to do, right? We are website creators. That's why we're in the room, and it's what differentiates this kind of research, I think, from sort of pure market research.
And again, look. So again, the pessimist in me has worded this question, and in terms of what we do, what would happen if we didn't do this kind of research, Tom? Again, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's easy to say, forget the last website, it's rubbish, we want something completely new, we don't want to see it again, that kind of thing. That's probably foolhardy to think like that. If you don't have time to look at the existing site, you're going to likely make the same mistakes again as you progress to the next one, based on the same assumptions as you had before. What data can do, and what overall user research can do as well, it can help challenge some of those assumptions and make the best decisions when you're creating a website. I think going onto the existing website and working with that, you can identify 2 things. What doesn't work, so you can avoid those mistakes in the future. But also importantly, I think it's what does work. So what does work in terms of layouts, what pieces of functionality, what content, you know, what is working on the site and what we shouldn't be losing when we go into the new site, because there is always valuable stuff to be taken over. And there's also sort of certain layouts and certain areas for things where people might look for a link or something like that. One example is forums. So quite often a forum link, if you've got it in your top navigation or your primary navigation or even in the footer, because if you've got a decent following for your forum, they will look for that on the website. If you start moving that link, you're going to frustrate a lot of people. So it's important for us to understand through heat maps and through the data an idea of where those kind of important things are that we shouldn't be moving, so we're sort of minimising frustration with a changing website.
Good stuff. Okay, well, Tom, thanks for that. So there you have it. That's our 3 topics that we wanted to do, just sort of a deep dive into this afternoon, as I say, in support of our guide. Just as a wrap up, so those topics are the sort of clarity of purpose, and really the importance of that. It's the foundation of our project. It guides us through the project, and gives us an opportunity to resolve conflict, and also opportunity to keep our eye on the goal that we want to be heading towards. We've spoken about understanding our users, and again, while that's important, in addressing the real needs of the people that we're talking to, not the perceived needs, not what we think they're saying, but actually looking at evidence as to their real needs and their real motivations. And finally, just taking an opportunity just to learn from our current, I've said old site, our current site, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how does that affect us moving forward. So that those were 3 bits from our guide that we really pulled out that we thought were most of interest. That doesn't mean, however, that there wasn't actually quite a lot in that guide that we could have covered. So what did we leave out? So look, again, we just took a moment to reflect, and we thought, you know, if there are other topics covered there that we might just give an honourable mention to. Yeah, content and hosting and support were 2 other bits that the guide looked at that, again, are close to both mine and Tom's hearts. So just as a little added bonus, let's just light touch, Tom. There's really 2 things, I guess, in terms of content that we could look at. There's a sort of content from a messaging perspective that I know you're very is close to your heart, and then also from my perspective, there's sort of the practicalities of content from a project perspective as well.
Yeah, so I think Fred Sales content is close to my heart. I think I wrote content for websites for about 8 years, so I'd like to think I could speak on this with authority, but we'll try. So firstly, you said that content, I think in a lot of projects, is a consistent issue. Quite often it's left to the last minute, it's forgotten about, which I've found frustrating for a number of years, because content forms a key part of your user experience. It really does, and I think it goes a long way of engaging with your user, and it's some of the most important elements of your site. People are coming to read content and coming to engage with it, so it deserves as much sort of prominence as the design in the project. So what we try and do, and we always try and tackle it early, and we always try and get the client thinking about content as early as possible, through doing things like building sort of content maps, where we're looking at the new sitemap versus the old sitemap and how to transition the content over. We also, we look at providing copywriting assistance, or we're looking at providing layouts with ideas of where content should sit and how many words should be written, that kind of thing. Just so we're giving as much support as possible, even to the point we've got tools such as Gather Content, which are really good at collating content early in the project before the site is ready to take it. But we can place content in, leave it there for the time being until it comes to the time of content loading. I think that's they're things that we try and do to minimise that. I think that's a thing we can see consistently on projects. In terms of those points up there, I suppose, matching old pages with the new, I kind of touched on it there. What I typically do as part of the project is take an existing sitemap, we'll crawl the site, pull down all the pages, and then take a new sitemap, and we'll try and we'll perform a gap analysis between the 2 and identify what pages carry over and what needs to be done to them, what pages are new, what pages are lost, and that just helps sort of audit where and how content is going to be moved. Identifying whether content needs to be updated or not can often be down to whether there's layout changes, whether there's a brand change, whether there's a desire to just simply spruce it up. They're all things that happen. Quite often there's more strategic reasons, so I would always say it's worth updating your content particularly if there's new objectives or if the company's moving into a new area with new users and new customers, and you've got to think about talking to those customers in a different way. I think that's when, you know, updating the content becomes a real issue. And then creating new content for new pages. As I said, from a content map, we always try and create this content map. Within it, we'll have content notes of identifying what needs to be done for each page. So, but within that, it gives an idea of whether it's light updating or a brand new page. So that helps identify what new pages there are. And then within that, you want to add notes. So for years and many a time, I've written content on the back of a sitemap with just a title to write from. Copywriters may recognize the term the curse of the blank page. Very hard to write in that instance. So we always try and provide a brief synopsis of all the pages we're putting on the website, give an idea of what's going to go into that page, what its purpose is, who it's speaking to, and then we also may even go to the point of giving layouts for that page in terms of how many words should go in certain areas, how many titles we're looking at, where we can break down into bullet points, that kind of thing. So ultimately, creating new content for new pages is about getting the planning in for it early and making sure that you've got the structure for those pages and what those pages are about. Makes it a lot easier. Makes it a lot easier to tick those off as you get closer and closer to the launch date.
Sure. And so as Tom just said there, from a messaging perspective, content is obviously hugely important and can change greatly. From a practical perspective and a project perspective, there's really two things in terms of actual content loading and then content production as well. So it's a real plus for the people building, designing, even at the wireframe stage, for us to have access to live, real content that we want to put in the new site. If we can begin to build our wireframes, sort of the outline structure of your new site, using actual content that you're going to be using, that makes the process that much easier. It also makes it that much more valuable. You get a far better view of what your site's going to look like in terms of weight on a page, section size, all those sorts of things. So yeah, and that's really about the timing of the production of it. It's an activity that has its own place in a project plan, needs to be respected, and can add a huge amount of value just in terms of the timing of its delivery. There's also a perspective in terms of loading the content into a new site as well. So look, whether it's the client, whether it's the agency who's doing this loading, it has benefits and it has considerations that we should really be taking into account. If you play an active role as the client in the delivery of the project and load your own content, it has, in my experience, massive positive impact in terms of your usage of the CMS. Nobody likes change. New tools can feel very difficult to take on board at first. If the project plan needs you to load your own content and you want to load your own content, then I found that getting your hands on the CMS early has real benefits. If the agency loads the content for you, then okay, in terms of risk mitigation, then obviously the agency take that on board and we understand the amount of content we need to put in, etc. It allows us to be a little efficient when actually putting content into the site in terms of its styling, because every now and then the format of content that we might agree, sometimes what we receive is a little different, and that's understandable because again there could be lots of reasons why content is produced. So yeah, it means that we could style it and put it in, and that bit becomes a little bit more familiar. But then we just lose that opportunity of you as a client really taking control of your CMS, really making sure you've mastered it, really making sure you feel comfortable with it. All of this is training aside. I understand entirely that there are training sessions, etc., that can be run on these things, but nothing changes taking real ownership, taking control, and really putting that content in. So look, each has pluses and minuses. There is no right answer to this question, merely that each has considerations as well. So and just moving on to sort of what did we leave out. So this is definitely a topic that's very, very close to my heart. So hosting and support. Hosting is sometimes a tricky thing for us all to try and think about and try to come together to love in some fashion or other. Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, in terms of it's, it can be seen as a lifetime ownership cost, but it really is. It's like life support for the website. We can all pour, and this whole webinar has been about us pouring love and care and coming together as a team to answer, to understand what the real objectives are about our project, and we can pour all of that into this project, both you and as a client and us as your delivery partner as well. But hosting, unless your website is live, nobody can see it. Unless your website is up, nobody can see it. It is very, very attractive to put into Google a search term that relates to hosting, and you can see some really, really attractively priced, awful deals for hosting. And again, if we're not going to take this seriously, the prospect of the sort of traffic that's going to be arriving on that site and the effect that can have on its uptime, then it just feels a shame. We spend a lot of time honing a message, building a website, coming together as a team, and should be let down at the last moment by our hosting provider. It is a complicated area. If you're an organisation that is prone to spikes in traffic, if you have campaigns that you run, or perhaps TV campaigns or radio campaigns, or even if you run some very successful viral marketing campaigns or social marketing campaigns, you can have very high spikes in traffic. And again, we can advise and help with that, but we just need to understand that sort of flexibility again comes at a cost. And sort of just stepping away from the subject of hosting and more onto the support and the support of the CMS itself, having an ongoing positive relationship with your partner in terms of website delivery is a really, really positive thing. If I think about my time in the industry, so much of the efficiency that we can now deliver in terms of build timescales is because, particularly as we use WordPress, lots of the functionality that we're able to use is third-party modules, and general site updates become very important when you move to a model of again, not just our build quality, but also the different elements that we bring to the site to sort of give us the sort of experience that we're looking for. These modules need updating, the site needs updating, and to have a really positive relationship with the people that have built your site. No one's going to know it better, no one's going to be able to help you more, and again, just to keep our site robust, to keep it live and to keep it up, we'd suggest a really positive relationship, one with an SLA and support contractors as we might offer. Again, just allows that site to stay active and to deliver the best experience for you as well. So the two topics there, three main topics and two bonus topics. So again, thank you so much for that. And yeah, so I get a little passionate on hosting and support, particularly support. I certainly do, yeah. So that covers our talk. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I really hope that something of the spirit that we try and enter into these projects has come across from myself and Tom. Now we have, as we've been talking, we have had a couple of questions come in, if that's okay. So Tom, look, I might pose some of these to you, if that's okay. So that the first one, tools. So in terms of tools, so what sort of tools do you use?
Yeah, so I probably dropped a few of them as we were going through, just to give a roundup. Google Analytics we use quite a lot, but there's plenty of analytics packages out there. Hotjar is one worth installing on the site. Again, we've done it for about 2 or 3 years now. We got it quite early when it came out, but it's getting better and better, and you can do all things from heat maps on that, polls, so quick polls on your website to ask immediate feedback from users, and also session recording so you can see how people are progressing through your site. So in that surveys, we use something called SurveyMonkey. It's pretty widely used, but again, it just gives us a link that we can then share. We can share across through either adverts or through emails. It's also very quick and easy to build surveys on it. We've also got a lot of templates on there should you just be starting out. One we've recently started using is What Users Do. It's relatively high cost, but it gives users testing videos rapidly and quickly, but you can set users tasks and get them away to go and test your website. Again, probably something worth looking at for those who are sort of building a case for a new website. And Silverback does the same thing, but you can do it on your laptop, and we can take that out and use that remotely, or use that with people within your organisation. And gather content, we mentioned earlier before, as a way of collating content as we go through the site.
Got it, yeah.
The process, sorry.
Well, and gather content for lots of reasons actually is a really great tool for us to use, particularly as we focus so much on content as well. So look, Tom, we do have a question as well, Tom, that relates to, again, to research techniques. And Tom, I happen to know, Tom, that this is one that you and I have had a really good experience with before, and that's the use of focus groups.
Yep.
Do they work? Now, Tom, you and I worked on a particular project with a charity that works with a particularly vulnerable group of people in society, Tom, and we ran a focus group that I know you're passionate about. I know
most definitely. That was a good focus group. It was also the only way we could get people in a room. Individual interviews in that instance weren't possible at all. So again, it's about blending that. I think there's another question there about highest person being the loudest in the room as well, and that's always the issue with focus groups as well. You might have someone who's very loud who dominates the discussion. What we've found is we actually break down focus groups into smaller groups if that's the case, and hold smaller exercises that help minimise some of those loud voices within focus groups. That's always my criticism of focus groups.
Yeah.
You've always got one or two that talk the most.
Yeah, sure.
If that's the case, you split it down into smaller groups. In terms of that one about the highest paid persons, do you remove them from the process?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
There's been times where we've pulled out the highest, someone who's particularly loud from a workshop and taken them out of the room to say that that's, their input's appreciated, but they're now dominating the conversation. The other thing is we'd always encourage a steering group to be built of people who are of a similar level of seniority, so that they can all speak on a level with each other, so no one's dominating that steering group too much as well. That's sort of two things we try and aim to look at, I think.
Yeah, and so again, having somebody dominating, particularly a workshop environment, Thomas, I mean, over the years, it's something that we've dealt with on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
If I think about the way that we set up our workshop environment, so as generally as the person who's managing some of those projects, I open those workshops just to try and set the rules a little bit, which is actually this is a facilitated environment, and it sounds like an odd thing to say, but actually we come with as many questions as we do answers, and we're going to be asking quite a lot of questions. And we have to satisfy ourselves as well at the beginning of a collaborative workshop that we might run, that actually we need to leave the room with lots of those questions answered.
Yes.
And so I think, again, there is no right or wrong answer to that particular question, but we've become quite adept at running a balanced workshop environment.
And it's the exercises we use as well in that instance. So we quite often use card sorting in groups, which often brings out the quieter people in the room. We have something called the gut test, where we aggregate scores of people's reviews of websites, so, how people react to the designs of websites. Again, that helps to sort of balance the highest and loudest paid opinion in the room. And then we often with the sketching, so the sketching of wireframes, we might sit people down and get them to sketch together, so everyone's sharing their ideas on an equal platform. So it's not just a discussion, it's actually a sharing of ideas. That's some of the ways we've minimised that in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And while we have two last questions just in the 3 minutes that we've got left of the hour. So somebody asking about workshops, so what's involved in the workshop that you run, and how does it affect the outcome of the project? As passionate as I got about hosting a minute ago, the workshops that we run, that environment where we bring together the research, we bring together people that design, people that develop, the actual people that are going to be working on the project, along with you in a facilitated environment, has been one of the things I think that has been behind lots of the project successes we've had recently. Yes, it has transformed our process from a them and us supplier relationship into a single project team of which we are all part, and that workshop environment, a facilitated place where the person who designed your website will be sitting opposite you when you receive the research, so you can challenge each other, positively challenge each other, has been completely transformative as far as I'm concerned. The last question we had, and it's a project management question. Yeah, thank you very much. So we might have mentioned waterfall just briefly earlier in the presentation. This particular person said, I've heard a lot about waterfall versus agile. What do you use, and what is the right approach? That is such an interesting question. It probably needs its own hour, to be brutally honest with you. But the answer is that the process is a tool like any other, and there will be some deployments in which an agile process, which for those that don't know is a process that's focused far more on the delivery and the iteration of a code base, and the idea is that you would improve the code, you focus all your effort on building, and you build to iteration. There will be some clients for whom that will be really appropriate. There will be some clients for whom a waterfall approach, and literally a waterfall is we do an activity that ends, that leads onto another activity, that ends, leads onto another activity. So a research to a workshop to design to build in a waterfall fashion. There will be those clients for whom that is the right approach and it's best for them. And just put simply, in the literally 30 seconds we've got left, just to put simply, if your stakeholders, and you will know them better than us, if your stakeholders are people who are comfortable in not knowing exactly what the outcome of their project will be in terms of functionality, if they are comfortable with that, then they might be stakeholders that would prefer an agile approach. If your stakeholders are very keen to know exactly what they're going to be receiving, then obviously we need to put a lot more time into research, a lot more time into constructing wireframes and things like that, so that you can manage them better. They can understand precisely what's going to come out of the other end. The answer is, what is the right approach? There is no right approach. It very much depends on the situation, and it depends on the stakeholders that we're managing. So look, thank you so much for that. I think we've actually got, there might be one or two other questions, but again, we're pretty much out of time. So we'll happily come back to you. Again, we've got who those people have asked them, so we'll come back to you after the session if that's okay. But it just remains for me to say thank you so much for taking the time for an hour of your day to allow me and Tom to talk you through just some of the most important parts of the process that we run, and some of the most important parts of, for us, the thinking that if you are at the very beginning and early stages of your project process that you want to get off the ground, there's some thinking that we really think will benefit for you. Again, the guide that we're hosting this session in support of is called How to Make Your Next Website a Success. You can download it from our website. And look, it just remains me to say thank you to Tom, thank you to Vicky Baker as well, who set up the session. Vicky, thank you very much, and thank you finally to you for listening.